Hello everyone, my name is Hedgehog. Today I'm here to talk about the Ede Valley Timeline. About a year ago now, actually, I made a video called the Ede Valley Timeline V1. I intended to periodically update it as the story went along, but since then, I kind of got busy and it got away from me. Until, however, I discovered a site called World Anvil. On this site, you can it acts as a wiki essentially for creative worlds. So I can put a timeline in. I can do all this crazy shit. It's awesome. If you want to check it out for yourself, the link's in the description below. I'm gonna slowly move most of my stories over to there, and there'll be a lot of extra info on characters and stuff eventually too, I'm hoping. So that'll be really cool. But for now, we're gonna look at the timeline that I've constructed on this site. Eventually, I hope this will look prettier if I decide to get a premium account here. But World Anvil, just sponsor me. I love you. All right. So, without further ado, in order to, applaud out the arc and give us a little break, here we go. We're going to finally coalesce the story into its proper timeline. Because why tell my stories in order? So our story begins with the prehistory, and that's everything before the history that we know to be fact. So the only thing I have here right now is the sinking of Atlantis at approximately 5000 BCE. So this is Rabbit Heart parts 1 through 4. And essentially in this section of the story, a princess of Atlantis named Morna and a warlock named Gilvaden the All-Knowing travel in order to defeat this thing called the Truth. They eventually find it, they stab it in the face, however they don't defeat it, instead they seal it away inside Morna's sword Brandau. So much time passes, and eventually at 67 BCE, Lucius Marcellus is born on the island of Britain. Eventually, he is taken as a slave by a Roman, and he grows up with the name Lucius Marcellus. Eventually, he grows so close to his master that when death comes for him, he refuses to let her pass. Instead, she curses him to be a vampire, and he murders his master, and it's very sad, especially after realizing that he's bequeathed all of his property and all of his material wealth to him. Oof. So Lucius Marcellus goes wandering off in search of knowledge for many, many years. Eventually, in 900 CE, we catch up with him as he meets Zair Flooferpoofen, a wizard who has lost his memory via a magical accident, lost his magical memory via a magical accident. However, Zair does know enough to tell him about the truth and give him the story of Morna and the Truth. This is not a story, but at about 1200 approximately, Orm finds Service, somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. He's just floating. We don't know why. He's just there. He's just there. Moving forward, we finally get into more modern times. So we catch up with our story in 1955 with the closing of St. Adelaide's Asylum. All of the patients are kicked out on the streets. They can no longer be there because the asylum is shutting down. Little do they know that this series of buildings, is now going to be used as a government experiment. In the late 50s, Buttercup and a series of other children are put through several experiments in order to bring to fruition Project Paragon. Of these, Buttercup is the only successful experiment. She ends up becoming a paragon, a crazy powerful human being, even not a human being at this point, and she is kept sedated and under control because otherwise she will just destroy everything. Eventually, she enlists the help of a doctor named Aaron Hodge to help her escape. He has a little daughter, and when he is killed in their failed attempt, Buttercup lies and tells them that he died trying to prevent her escape. More time passes, and in 1976, St. Adelaide School for Gifted Youth is founded by a mysterious director. We don't know who she is. She's clearly not Aaron Hodge's daughter at all. After a while, we catch up with our characters, and Doug Bailey is born in 1999. He has a heck of a teenage life. He goes through a lot of shit. His sister dies of cancer. He falls off the bandwagon. He begins to see hallucinations of her cancerous final appearance in his mind. He eventually meets some friends. They do some pot. Unfortunately, he does too much and realizes he needs something better, a bigger high. So he approaches their friend Morgan and eventually really falls off the bandwagon. He realizes, however, he has to stop when one night a girl who was sitting on his lap goes right through the windshield of Morgan's car. We don't know what happens to him. Clearly he's in juvie or in jail or something of that nature. And Doug ends up going to St. Adelaide's. There he meets the director, who decides to torture him more because she can. That's how his hair turns white, and that is where he is when our story truly begins. Moving forward, in 2005, Tommy Miller is a third grader who is abused by his father. He meets this guy Ramus, who has a magical gypsy wagon. Ramus is not creepy. Shut up. And Ramus tells Tommy that he can take him away from all this. He can give him a better life. Initially, Tommy thinks he has to stay at home, but after nearly being choked to death by his father with a belt, he decides to run away and joins Ramus on some crazy adventures. Cut to about 5 years later, and Tommy, on one of his fun adventures into the world of Hithali, meets this girl named Kay. Kay is the apprentice of an Inkulo, a tattoo artist, essentially. And they discover a rift. And Kay thinks that the rift can grant wishes. In a way, I guess it does, because her wish is to have friends, and Tommy agrees then to be her friend. Cut forward another year to spring 2011, and Gil Trenton, the real Gil Trenton, dies after he finds a magical sword, and Gilvaden the All-Knowing takes over his body. A little while after that, Nico and Lila meet when Nico's bodyguard betrays him, and Lila saves his life. The Borzovs take her in, and she trains to be Nico's bodyguard. In fall of 2015, Cindy takes a history class. That is, of course, the original Ede Valley story, the OG. The OG Ede Valley story is ancient history, and that is where she meets Lucius Marcel. At the time, Cindy goes by Cynthia. She is a very different character. I totally did not retcon her personality or anything at all, but that's that. A little while after that, in spring to summer of 2016, Cindy has a revelation about the world after she accidentally kills her chemistry teacher and makes a deal with a demon named Cowell for crazy witchy powers. She has a kind of, breakdown, ends up having to stay in a psych ward for a summer, and on the other side of it, she becomes a much different person. In fall of 2016, Buttercup escapes from where she was being held under St. Adelaide's, and she goes and approaches 3 mythical Celtic gods who are a girl biker gang. She enlists them after undergoing 3 trials to help her with something we don't know of, and they wait a year for some reason. Just shh, it's fine, shut up. Now we come to the current time period, the Adelaide's arc. This is everything that has happened in the mainline stories. It starts with Cindy and Marcel reuniting with the personal history of Lucius Marcel, parts 1 and 2, as he tells her about his past and his life. Eventually it's revealed that Cindy herself is a witch, and we go back to Cindy's backstory. Also in September of 2017, Nico and Lila come to Ede Valley. After Nico did something to someone, Lila and Nico get put in a safe house in Ede Valley, way out of the way. Eventually, however, they are betrayed by one of their family members, Vincent, who turns out to be a double-crosser and a member of the Morelli family. They're mortal enemies this whole time. He attempts to take Nico and Lila to the Don of the Morelli family. However, Nico and Lila kill him and his other friend waiting in a car below, and they shove off into the night. Later that night, in How to Conduct Shady Deals in Your Average Suburban Home, they find an abandoned house on William Street. This also happens to be the street that Cindy lives on, and they meet up with her, and they eventually strike a bargain that Nico and Lila can live in this house as long as they provide Cindy with interesting ingredients for her to use. In October 2017, we get to see the pub under Nico and Lila's safe house, finally, and The Smiling Goat is an apt name for a drinking establishment run by a demon. And this is where we properly meet Cowell. Cowell is a demon who runs a bar. He has a back room where he makes shady deals, and it's filled with the jars of human souls and other bits that he's collected. In this particular story, he makes a deal with a reporter, Penelope, in order to give her the knowledge of the affairs that happened in the apartment above. However, the story never gets published. We don't know for what reason. It could be several. Something to do with her missing her loyalty. Later that month in October, an October picnic happens where Cindy and Marcel kind of realize and confess their feelings to each other and become an actual couple. It's cute. They get ice cream. It's great. I love it. In November of 2017, we meet Orem and Service properly in New Acquaintances, plus an informative history of Atlantis, when Cindy wants to know more about Marcel and what he's doing with his life. So Orem is a dragon who is bound to this library, the East Branch, and she usually appears as a human. We haven't seen her dragon form yet. She does have one. Service is her automaton assistant. He looks to be about 15. He has terrible fashion sense because Orem is the one dressing him. And he, at the time, is emotionless, seems to have no personality, no emotion. He is basically a robot. That will change. In December of 2017, Tommy returns to Ede Valley after the death of Remus, and he, in an attempt to get out of Ede Valley, tries to help himself by going to see his father, Robert Miller, who lives in squalor, next and above the Smiling Goat. It does not go well. He eventually finds himself in the pub below, talking to Cowell, who offers him a job. In January of 2018, Mike arrives at St. Adelaide's after receiving a mysterious scholarship to go. He meets a host of weird characters, including his roommate Doug Bailey, the former pop idol Julie Nakajima, Guild Shrenton, the weird wizard role player, Sonia Borzovna, a cute sunny Russian girl, Victor West, a guy who is totally not trying to reanimate the dead, and Abigail Hodge, the creepy-ass student librarian. Things are going to be weird. The next day, Mike grows curious. He has a strange first day. He realizes that people are undergoing sessions, and also Doug gives a romance lesson to Victor to not stick his dick in crazy. He doesn't listen. Also later that month, we were introduced properly to the director, in which a mysterious force is given a character but not yet a face. We learn a little bit about her, how she's having difficulties with the board of directors of St. Adelaide's, and how they're trying to shut down her experiments that she's doing in the basement. She has some kind of a plan to get rid of them. We don't know what it is yet. In January 2018, meetings happen. The Scooby Gang begins to form. Cindy, Nico, and Lila decide to go to the Smiling Goat in order to make a deal with Cowell to get some souls for him, for some people who will pay big money for them. They run into Tommy there. A bunch of things happen. Nico and Lila realize that Cowell has Cindy's perspective. They try to steal it, only to realize that it is not in fact her perspective because Cindy never had one in the first place. We don't know what that means yet, but it's there. Later on as well, Tommy meets with Orem and Service, and Cindy becomes I don't want to say she becomes a better person, but Cindy realizes that she's finally found the thing she was missing in her life, some friends, and that's great. Some time passes. A late night at St. Adelaide's occurs. Doug and Gil and Victor try to dig up a body. Sonia has creepy dreams. Mike makes Jilly go with him to the library in order to do some research on the history of St. Adelaide's. Later that month, we meet Ace, the man who died twice just in this one scene. Ace is a businessman who years ago made a deal with Cowell to not die. But in exchange, he can't die. It sucks. So he's come back to the Smiling Goat in order to renege this deal, and he uses a loophole in the deal-making process to literally just barter back his ability to not die in order to get the ability to die. It's great. Cal is never going to let that happen ever again, and it wasn't me just being lazy and not being able to figure out another way around it. Shh. Also in February, to glorify my platinum soul happens, Julie is taken in for a session with the director, who utterly breaks her with memories of her past idol group, in which she bashed a chair over one of her fellow singers' heads in a live concert and was shipped off to St. Adelaide's. Julie just utterly gets broken. It's great. It's fun. Doug picks her up in the hallway, brings her back to his room. She breaks down and cries. It's wonderful. Later on, as soon as this happens, Mike starts digging into St. Adelaide's even further. He is in the library when Jilly enters the library and approaches Abigail and Victor about taking over the school. This concerns him greatly, and he falls deeper into his hole of obsessive investigating. Finally, the St. Adelaide's revolution happens. Jilly and Co. enact their plan. They kill all of the psychiatrists associated with the director. They go to the director's office. Unfortunately, the office is empty. She's not there. There's dust everywhere. Nothing's in the office. This utterly freaks Jilly out. However, Mike stays around to see if he can figure out why this office is this way. He stumbles upon a hidden door, only to be confronted with Abigail Hodge, who is revealed to be the director herself. She takes him down to the depths of St. Adelaide's, and we have not seen him since. I mean, we have, but at this point we haven't. The morning after, Jilly announces to the school she has taken over the school, and Mike is initially told what is going to happen to him. He is going to be the next experiment in Project Paragon. Abigail is batshit crazy. It's a good time. Finally, the night before the first raid of St. Adelaide's, a clear night before the storm happens, the most infamous Ede Valley story, I'd say. Cindy loses her virginity. Her and Marcel watch the news and realize that St. Adelaide's has been taken over and that Mike is inside. Quickly, they form the Scooby Gang. Everybody's there. Tommy, Nico, Lila, Cowell, Orem, Service, Cindy, Marcel. The whole gang is there. They decide they're going to go and they're going to try to get into St. Adelaide's. They are successful, and eventually it looks like things are going to go okay. They're dealing with the students. They're gonna go look for Mike. However, Service ends up peeling off from the rest of the group, following Abigail, finding Mike in the basement, only to get caught by her. After seeing what Orem claims is probably the truth, he gets caught. Abigail uses this to her advantage to cause Jilly to enter a panic attack. Jilly sicks Victor's robot army on the invaders. They have to escape. They run to the trash room. Sonia joins them because she believes that what they're doing is wrong. Lila has to carve out Nico's eye because Gil cursed it somehow with massive amounts of pain. However, this takes way too long. Lila ends up having to sacrifice herself to save Nico and the rest. She did. Luckily enough, she's not that dead. In the next story, Valkyrie, she has a talk with Death and gets to see an alternate timeline, which now I can also show you. So moving on over to the Dead Branch timeline temporarily. So this is the alternate future that will happen if Lila moves on and does not take up the mantle of Valkyrie. This is the timeline she is shown by Moore after her death. Of course, this starts with Lila's death. That is the connecting point. None of these have timestamps because I want it to remain very vague. So sometime after that, Nico returns to the city. After Lila's death, he loses all confidence in his ability to lead. He leaves the hospital of his own accord, returns to the city and to the Borisovs. He works for them for a long time. Eventually, he ends up getting married off to a Morelli in hopes of ending the family feud for forever. They don't feel anything towards each other. At the very least, he doesn't feel anything towards her. We don't know her opinion on this. Sometime after that, his wife dies, but not before giving him a son, leaving Nico a widower to raise his son. It sucks. Something happens years after that. Nico and his son go on some sort of raid. Nico warns him that Bailey, whoever that is back in town, but his advice is not heeded. Something happens to him. We don't know what it is. However, after that, Nico confronts Bailey in the graveyard over Lila's grave, begs for his son's life. Bailey just laughs. The two men fight. We don't see the conclusion of this fight. We don't know what's happened. However, sometime after this, unable to bear the pain of losing his son and still mourning Lila, Nico shoots himself in the head while staring at her grave. That's the end of the Dead Branch timeline. It's great. It's a good time. So moving back to the main timeline. Lila decides to take up the mantle of Valkyrie to help Nico and all these other people, and to essentially ascend. She ascends. We don't know much about what's been happening with her after this. However, she will return. I promise you all. After this, Nico is in the hospital for 9 days. He struggles with himself and with his ability to lead and his ability to mess things up and mourning Lila. But eventually, right before he's going to leave and go back to the city, Lila writes a single word on the mirror. That word is pancakes. And Nico decides that he has to stay and help and figure out what they're going to do about St. Adelaide's. So, in the meantime, Sonia is staying with Orem and Service, and Service leads her to the Sword Brandau, which is in Orem's basement currently. So Morna ends up being able to come back because they hypnotize Sonia and allow her to talk to Morna, and of her own accord, Sonia decides to give Morna her body so that she can fight back. So Sonia dies. It's very sad. There's a lot of deaths. But Sonia dies, and Morna returns. Slightly after that, probably the next day, Abigail makes her move. She convinces Gil to keep working for her for the time being. She has some fun times with Victor, but most of all, she confronts Doug and Jilly right after Doug has attempted to tell Jilly the truth that he's just found out, that Abigail is the director. However, at this point, Mike is no longer Mike. Abigail summons him, calling him Nihil, and he stabs Jilly's heart out of her chest with his bare hand. Jilly falls dead in Doug's arms, and a third wraith joins Doug's entourage as Nihil and Abigail drag him away to the bowels of St. Adelaide's. The second raid of St. Adelaide's then happens after that. Buttercup and the Talons join the group this time in order to make a distraction. They defeat the robot army. They confront Abigail. Abigail and Victor unfortunately get away, but Gil and Morna reunite. It's cute. It's adorable. They have a big, hug fest, and Morna slaps him. It's great. Meanwhile, Nico, Cindy, Marcel, Tommy, and Service are sneaking in the back way. They go and try to find the way into the basement to try to save Mike. Unfortunately, they run into Mike in the hallway. They don't recognize him at first. There's a big battle. It's great. Eventually, Cindy realizes that this is in fact her brother Mike. And her and Tommy go into a classroom to have a discussion with him to try to figure this shit out. Eventually, Nihil remembers some of the things about Mike, and he begins to regain a little bit of his humanity. However, it's going to still be a very long process. Meanwhile, Doug is being tortured in the basement. He has gotten some things out of Abigail because he's going to be dead after this. But she explains to him that he is going to be able to watch himself go insane and then die because she is going to put mercury off gas in his mouth and watch it poison him. She proceeds to do this. Says, "Don't forget to say Fuzzy Pickles." Leaves. Unfortunately for her, Doug is then quickly, before the damage is too great, he is saved by Victor, who tells him to go and get out. And Doug begins to wander down the hallway. Meanwhile, the big party, joined by Morna and Gil, have gone down the elevator into the basement. They meet up with Doug. Nico decides to go take Doug back to the hospital and leaves the rest of the party. He and Doug have a really weird conversation in the elevator going back up. And that's all we hear from them for the moment. The rest of the party continues down below, confronts Abigail. She laughs a lot and da-da-da-da. Mike chases after her. She attempts to escape. The rest face off against the truth. Is scary. Is big. It almost makes Marcel kill everyone. But then, for some reason, Cindy is not affected by it, unlike all the others. For some reason, we don't know. And together with all of her friends, she manages to plunge Brandau into the truth and destroy it? ? After this, the epilogue, Scattered Pieces, happens. Cindy is in the hospital for a while. She and Marcel figure their shit out. Doug is also confronted by a mysterious woman who goes by the name Kay. She's going to help him kill Abigail Hodge. After this, of course, Orem explains to the group that the truth is not really gone. It is broken, but it is not destroyed. There are still pieces scattered about everywhere of the truth, and it is still their mission now to find those pieces of the truth. So the quest continues. In April of that year, Gil and Morna leave Ede Valley. They help Tommy fix Matilda, but Tommy realizes that he can't leave Ede Valley yet. So Morna and Gil leave with Matilda temporarily, and Tommy stays behind to hang out with Service and his family, and it's a good time. In May, finally, Cindy graduates. She graduates high school. It's great. It's a good time. Tommy meets back up with his family. It's heartfelt. It's teary-eyed. Everyone cries. It's great. Mike, Nihil, Beta, whoever he is, talks to Buttercup, who is also going to leave now. Buttercup tells him that she has a wish for him. She wishes that he can someday figure out who he actually is, which is something we're all trying to figure out, I believe. She leaves, and the arc ends as it began, with Cindy and Marcel. They sit on his back balcony and discuss what they're going to do this summer, because finally they don't have to hide anymore. They're going to go on a road trip. It's going to be a good time. So, that is the timeline. Ta-da! We did it, lads. We did it. We went through the timeline. This video is going to be like a half an hour long. It's going to be great. I'm going to cry a lot. I'm trying to edit it, but thank you all so much for sticking around with Ede Valley all this time. I'm so glad that there are so many of you who feel so passionate about this work. I feel incredibly passionate about this work. There will be a couple of updates of Ede Valley this summer, a couple minor updates, I'm sure. Check the Discord server in the near future. I have a question for all of you on there. And also, I hope to get that cast recording going. There's still a couple people I need to contact, a couple people I need to talk to about it, and I need to organize it, obviously. But I'm hoping that can be a thing. So we'll see how that goes. And thank you all so much. Link to the patrons in the description below. I love you all.